Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things M365 Compliance Podcast. My name is Nikki Chappell. I'm a Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway and also an MVP. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Ryan John Murphy. I am a compliance and data security TS here at Microsoft in the UK. And we're joined by a guest today, Ewelina, who's going to introduce herself now. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, guys. So my name is Ewelina Paczkowska. I'm a Microsoft Security Consultant at Threadscape. I mainly help customers implement and manage and review, but I kind of work with anything under that whole umbrella of Microsoft Security. So helping clients maximize their return on investment and utilize all the different capabilities that they pay for with their Microsoft license.
Great. Perfect. As you saw, there's a little bit of a delay because Nikki and Ewelina are actually international at the moment, so there might be a bit of a cut over on the conversation. But yeah, welcome again. Thanks for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you on. And we're going to talk about something that I see a lot of people ignoring this particular classifier rather than embracing this particular classifier. And I can understand from a perspective of why people do it, because when you read the documentation, it seems very complex. Me and Nikki have actually spoken about this particular classifier on previous podcasts. I think it was one of the first two, if I'm not mistaken, Nikki.
Yep.
And that is exact data match. Now, you've actually just done a project on this, haven't you, Ewelina? And you're going to share how this come about and how it was actually utilizing your own benefit for the customer as well. How to go about this, how to look at it from a rationalization perspective, where they can be used when it comes to labels and so on and so forth. So take it away.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, you're right in saying that people usually just ignore and completely just skip an exact data match classifier. So it's one of the classifiers within that whole Microsoft Purview stack. But for maybe anyone that wouldn't be necessarily too familiar with different types of classifiers, let me just walk you through and explain where that EDM classifier sits in terms of Microsoft information protection. So when we look at that entire stack of Microsoft Purview, so under that whole umbrella of Microsoft Purview, one of these solutions, you can use different types of classifiers in your labeling policies or auto labeling policies as well. So we've got three main types of data classifiers. First of all, we've got a trainable classifier, then we've got sensitive information types, and then at last we've got exact data match classifier that we also would refer to an EDM classifier. So what it is, right? So an exact data match classifier, it's a classifier in Microsoft Purview that helps with that whole data classification. So it detects sensitive information based on exact values. So it's really good in terms of making sure that your amount of false positives that get matched within your policies or within Content Explorer, that it's really minimized because it only matches specific values that would match exactly to your data source that you then upload. So I don't really know whether your experience would be the same within the entire Microsoft 365 ecosystem, but usually when I do work with customers and we log into their Microsoft Purview Admin Center, what I often would see is the same kind of set of sensitive information types. So these would be mainly out-of-the-box sensitive information types that generate a lot of false positives. So we're talking about, millions or billions amount of different matches in every single tenant that I would see, regardless of the industry that a specific customer would be within, right? So, someone, let's say, within the, construction company would get a lot of matches within the medical terms, right? So I don't know whether you guys have the same kind of experience when you do work with your clients and how kind of you go about it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky problem. It always happens. I tend to find the New Zealand driving license seems to come up as one of the top hits. And I think for me, my biggest frustration is that on a tenant basis, you can't hide and say ignore the ones that are not relevant. So it's fantastic that Microsoft have produced them all, but when you kind of start looking at the reports and say you've got all of this sensitive data, it's kind of false positive hits, and it's kind of difficult to kind of sometimes, I suppose, see through everything when you've got so much noise.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I guess, you know, in Microsoft's defense, those algorithms that are in the background for those sensitive information types are there as a default and as a starting point. So we, you know, Microsoft can't take a guess of what types of data you have in your environment and what's mapping back to that particular algorithm or regex or keyword list. So you are going to see a lot of false positives. But, you know, I think part and parcel of sensitive information types with any lexicon, right, is actually fine-tuning it for your environment for the best potential that you can get it. And what I see a lot of customers do is if it's coming very close to what they want, just take a copy of it and create your own, and then add in your own exclusions, your own supplementing elements, and so on and so forth, even your own functions, and, you know, tweak the regex if the regex is in there, so you can gain the best of it. But I do think from that perspective, you can actually achieve what you want to do, either with a sensitive information type, a trainable classifier, or exactly what we're talking about today with exact data match.
Absolutely. So I definitely agree with everything that you guys said. And I guess with this hot topic that we've got at the moment, which is secure by default with Microsoft Purview, right? I think it's important for us to bring awareness to the people out there that maybe would be using auto labeling policies within their organizations and using those out of the box or custom sensitive information types to automatically classify their data repositories, right? So where it kind of can get a little bit dangerous is if you just don't fully customize those sensitive information types, you don't make them your own, you rely on Microsoft's patterns and regular expressions or keywords and stuff like that. So that could potentially lead to a lot of misclassified data within your repositories. So maybe I will just talk about the main advantages of EDM classifiers and kind of how they fit into that entire ecosystem. So with EDM classifiers, you get that higher accuracy because they only match specific values that you then upload with your schema. So it allows you for that granular precision, and obviously leads to reduced overhead for any ambiguity. You can, just like any trainable classifier or sensitive information type, you can completely customize them, make them your own, make them very specific to your specific use cases. So for example, if you're a medical company, you deal with a lot of patients, maybe you want to secure that patient data, right? So maybe every single patient would have a specific patient ID number, and then based on the country, I suppose, where you're based, you know, that patient would then have social security number, insurance number kind of assigned to them. Obviously, they would have like first name, last name, their address, phone number, and any other contact information. So that's just one example of a scenario where EDM classifiers would be really useful. If you work with any clients, or even if you're a company that has a lot of different employees, obviously your employees or your clients would again have an ID number that would be very specific to them. So it's a unique number that they would be recognized by. So in those specific scenarios where you deal with that highly sensitive data and you maybe want to classify that data or use encryption for those types of data within your entire ecosystem, EDM classifiers can help you with that, because you can use those classifiers within your label policies or even within data retention and any other Microsoft Purview solution that would allow you the use of sensitive information types, for example. So you can integrate EDM classifiers with a lot of different solutions if you use Microsoft 365, and then it's that dynamic sensitivity application. So as I mentioned, you can use your retention policies based on the content contained within your data. So EDM classifiers would be just kind of one part of that as well. So how to set up an EDM classifier. And Ryan, you raised a really good point about people maybe looking at Microsoft documentation and thinking to themselves that it's really complex to set it up, and that's why they kind of dropped that whole idea. Obviously, I work with EDM classifiers quite a lot, so I've done a lot of trial and error in terms of that classification. So it comes quite easy to me. But for anyone out there that maybe is looking for a little bit of help to do that. So I mapped out 12 different steps how to set up an EDM data classifier. So if you don't mind, I would like to walk through that setup just now.
Please do.
Great. So first of all, would be just to prepare your data set, right? So at the moment, there are a couple of options where you can get a kind of an idea where to get your sample data and download a CSV file, which then you can modify and upload your own sample data to it. So one of the options is using something called dlptest.com. I don't know whether people would be familiar with that website, but it's a really great resource for downloading sample data, not only for EDM classifiers, but maybe for any other types of testing that you might be doing. So on that website, you have an option to download a CSV file based on specific sensitive information that would be contained within that file, such as name of someone, social security number, date of birth, and so on. So there are a couple of options there once you click on the drop-down menu to pick from. Another way how to do it within the new Purview Admin Center, which, by the way, is great, and I really like the look of it. So if you navigate to the Solutions, Microsoft Information Protection, and then you go over to the EDM classifiers, over in the top right corner, you've got an option to click on industry-specific sample files, where you can also download your sample data file that you can use to modify it and then upload your own data to it as well. So a couple of options here. You've got a US healthcare data, US insurance data, and US financial data. Obviously, if you're based in a different country, that information is still going to be similar. So to show you an example, this would be my sample data that I would be uploading. So let's say I've got a client ID number in column A, followed by first name, last name, address, and so on. So any basically information that I might have within my CRM system, I can just export that and use it as my sample data set that I can then upload. So that was step one. Step two is optional. So if you're an organization where you need custom sensitive information types to recognize the types of data that you might be dealing with. So in my scenario, that would be a client ID, right? It's something specific to my organization, and it's not something that an out-of-the-box sensitive information type would be able to recognize. Maybe it's based on a specific keyword. Maybe there's a specific regular expression. So for example, my client ID number might consist of 3 letters followed by 5 numbers, right? So I set up a custom sensitive information type for that, just so that my primary element, which in this case would be a client ID, is then fully matched and recognized within the entire Microsoft ecosystem. So you don't have to do it if, for example, you work with types of data that Microsoft kind of covers off. But if you do want to make sure that your matches are not false positives, you may want to also set up a custom sensitive information type for your specific scenario in here as well. So step number 3 is then to create an Entra ID security group. So this group would then be used for any people that will be actually hashing and uploading your sensitive data for that EDM classifier. So you don't really need to do too much with it. It's just as simple as setting up a security group with an Entra ID. It needs to have a specific name. So it is within Microsoft documentation where they do specify what it needs to be called. So it's EDM _ data uploaders. And then within that group, you need to add users as members that will be actually hashing and uploading your sensitive data. So basically anyone that will be doing the uploading of your sensitive data to the EDM classifier, they need to be a member of that group. So when that is created, step number 4 would be just to jump into the Purview Admin Center and create your EDM classifier. So the process is really simple. Again, you navigate to the Purview Admin Center, you go into Information Protection, Classifiers, and then EDM Classifiers. There are two types of experiences within EDM classifiers. So there's a classic experience and a new experience. So within this demo, I will just be using the new EDM experience, but people, of course, are free to use the classic experience as well. I just think the new experience is a little bit simpler to use. So once you click on Create EDM Classifier, you're then taken through the wizard of that EDM classifier. So obviously you need to put a name and a description to your EDM classifier. And then once you click Next, you're presented with two options, which we can see on that screen, screenshot within the middle of the screen. So choose a method for defining your schema, right? So over here, you can either upload a file containing sample data, which is recommended step by Microsoft, or you can manually define your data structure. So what it is basically telling the system and mapping your column names to the types of data that you will be using within your EDM classifier. So let me show you. We've seen my sample file, right? So I had column A was client ID, column B was first name, and so on, right? So it's all based on personal information. So now I need to map the different column names to different sensitive information types or specific match modes within this specific step. So if I take a client ID, I want it to be my primary element. So I want this to be the main specific value that I want matched. I don't really care about anything else at this point. I just want my client ID to match. So let's say if my client ID would be ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want that exact value to be matched. I don't want BCD 3, 4, 5, whatever matched. I want my specific client ID matched. So by default, obviously under the match mode column, Microsoft might not be able to recognize that this is the demo-client IDs custom sensitive information type. In my case, that this is the sensitive information type that I want to use. So you can just use the drop-down menu to pick the one that you want. And then you go through that list and make sure that you match all of your column names to some type of a match mode. In case of something like a phone number, email address, right? There's no sensitive information type that would get you a full match. So what you can use in this case is either the single token or a multi-token. So what it does is basically a single token equals one word, multi-token would be multiple words, right? And your goal here is to get a full match or a partial match on one or more sensitive information types. Maybe it's also important for me to say that your column name cannot have any white spaces in it. So that's why first name and last name, in my case, have no spaces in between the words. So once you have that mapped, you go to the next step where you have an option to specify whether the data in your columns is case sensitive or case insensitive. So in some cases, it might be really important. In some cases, it may not. You also have a second option to ignore punctuation signs or some of the delimiters. So to give you an example, right? If I export my data from a CRM system, maybe I have a different way of typing in or entering phone numbers than you, Nikki, or you, Ryan, right? Maybe I use 00 followed by the country prefix, but you use maybe a plus and a country prefix, right? So I still want to get a match, but I don't really care what way people enter that type of information. So that's why you may want to use that option to ignore some of the punctuations or some of the delimiters in your data as well. So once you have this modified to your specific scenario, you then click Next, and this is the step where you set up your detection rules for client IDs. So just like with any type of a data classifier, it's really important that you set up what's supposed to be a low confidence match, medium confidence match, and a high confidence match, right? So client ID being my primary element, we can see over at the top to the right that client ID and any of the three supporting elements that I can then pick would be my high confidence match, And then at the bottom for the medium confidence, I'm saying that my client ID, so my primary element, needs to be matched and also with any two of my supporting elements in this case as well. So that just guarantees you that your match is actually going to be either a medium or a high confidence match, and everything else can be ignored. So once we have your EDM classifier set up within the Purview Admin Center, you then go over and set up directories for EDM classifiers on your local machine that you are going to be using for uploading your sample data, uploading your schemas, and it's really simple. So Microsoft's recommendation is that you set up one specific folder called EDM with two subfolders, one for hash and one for data. So once you have that set up, you can then go over to the next step. The next step being downloading and installing the EDM upload agent. So again, couple of options in here. So there are two methods for hashing and uploading your data. You can either use the two computer method, where you use two computers to upload and hash your data. Maybe if you deal with highly confidential information, maybe you want to go down that road, or you can just use a simple computer method. So within the Microsoft documentation, which I'm sure we will be able to provide your viewers with a link to it. Obviously, I wrote a series about EDM classifier on my blog as well, where I do reference where to find all that information. So we'll make sure that we put some kind of a link at the end of this session as well. But once you install it, and again, you need to install it within a specific directory going by Microsoft's recommendation. So once you install it, it doesn't take longer than, let's say, 1 minute. So you won't be, unfortunately, able to take a coffee break in this case. But once that is installed, you can then authorize the EDM upload agent and run some scripts. So again, I won't be kind of diving into the scripts that you need to run in this specific case. Again, I will make sure that the slides are available for your viewers, and also all this information can be found on my blog. But this process is really simple. So even if you don't really have much experience with PowerShell or command prompt, these scripts or prompts are really, really easy to run. So you authorize the EDM upload agent. You can then download your schema to that folder that we were talking about once you set it up within your directory, and then you validate your data. So step 10 would be a key step within this entire process, which would be to hash and upload your sensitive data. So remember that the person that will be doing this, they need to be a member of that EDM data uploader security group. So you need to make sure that you've got some of the information before you run that script, such as the data store name, which is the name of your EDM schema. If you didn't take it down during the setup process, don't worry, because if you go to the Purview Admin Center and if you then navigate over to your EDM classifier that you've just set up, you can just click into that name and you will be able to see your data store name. You also need the data file. So this is just the path to your CSV file. You need your hash file location, your schema file, and optionally you can use something called allowed bad lines percentage. So this is very useful in situations where, for example, you export the data from your CRM system, but maybe there's an email address missing for one of the clients or one of your patients, or maybe something is not 100% accurate. So you want to kind of allow your data for having like a blank row, or maybe information that it wouldn't get a match in any case. So you can put in, for example, a 5%, 10%, whatever you kind of want, just to make sure that your data is still accepted, even though there might be some blank spaces within it. So after you do it, you obviously then just verify, troubleshoot if you need to, and check the status of your EDM within the Purview admin portal. And step 12 would be just to utilize your new custom sensitive information type, which got set up as a result of setting up an EDM classifier. So you will notice that for sensitive information types, there are different types of sets based on the level of license that you have within your organization as well. So for example, with that Microsoft 365 E5 level of license, or the equivalent of that E5, you can avail of exact data matches. But if you look at the list of different sensitive information types available as classifiers within your Microsoft Purview portal, you will be able to see that some of them would be an exact match type of asset, or a bundled entity, or just custom, or whatever it might be. So this is what will be set up as the result of you setting up your EDM classifier. So it's nothing else than just another custom sensitive information type, which then you can use within different policies. So you can utilize it within data loss prevention, insider risk management, data lifecycle management, and so on. So it's really, really useful in those scenarios, and it will definitely help organizations when they do want to avail of the option to have auto labeling in place and classify their data kind of at scale. So that's it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Not that complicated anymore, right?
No.
So I've got one question. So you've gone through that initial setup. How easy is it then, or can you automate kind of regular updates? Because obviously this is a snapshot in time when you upload the data. So do you recommend kind of getting a weekly feed or something from your original data source to upload?
Great question. So obviously this is going to be different for different organizations, right? And depending how often there might be new records available, right, or uploaded into your CRM systems, or wherever it is that you export your data from. I would definitely recommend trying to automate this process. So you can definitely use the APIs for it as well. And the script is based on PowerShell. So even you can set up something like a task that would be scheduled on maybe a weekly or monthly basis to make sure that your data is up to date and your schema gets updated on a regular basis as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I think you would really need to automate this, wouldn't you, just to make sure it does remain up to date.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Most of the customers where I've deployed this have that in place. They have that schema update in place, running with a scheduled task. Preference is the API. It's so much easier to set up, and it's so much of a less of a weighted call into the schema to run it back up to the EDM master database. But yeah, most of my customers run this. Some of them run it actually on a daily basis, depending on how large that data set is changed. More in the medical industries I've done that.
Okay.
Yeah, more in the medical industries where I've done that. But I think today has actually shown, for anybody watching or listening, that EDMs are not that scary. That initially when you start reading through them, because there's a lot of steps that you have to go through, I think it puts a lot of people off. But you put this down into such a beautiful art, if you like, Ewelina, where you can actually just think to yourself, now I can get far more accuracy with far more data import in the background with pretty much less time of actually fine-tuning a standard sensitive information type to get your accuracy, what you would get out of this, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, you can set up multiple EDM classifiers as well based on your specific scenarios or the specific types of data that you or your organization would be dealing with as well. But yeah, it's not so complex if you actually look into it and maybe do it once. So yeah. I would say to people that might be a little bit scared to run it in their production environment, if you do have a test tenant, which Microsoft is usually really good at providing these and having that option for customers to set them up, even for a period of 90 days, if you kind of want to walk through that process and just test it first before you apply it to your production tenant, then go and do it. There are multiple different options available online where you can actually just do it in a closed kind of test environment rather than your production environment, if you do kind of feel that you wouldn't be comfortable enough kind of messing around with your data repositories.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think those 90-day tenants with Microsoft, you can do a lot with them. You can do a lot in 90 days, especially when it comes to EDMs and any other types of Microsoft solutions. You mentioned before, Ewelina, that you you have a blog on this, and I think it's a multi-part blog as well. So it's very descriptive on how somebody can go and start to build this out. Share that with myself and Nikki, and we'll put that in the bio for the Spotify and the YouTube channel as well. So anybody, again, watching or listening to this today, I'll throw that link in. I've read that link, and I think it's very descriptive. And it was one of the reasons why Nikki and I reached out to bring you on the podcast, because as I said at the beginning, you're very welcome. As I said at the beginning, lots of people completely ignore EDMs for the wrong reasons, but they are such a benefit. They really, really are. Cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. And thank you very much. And as I said, I've got a 3-part series on EDM classifiers. I kind of do a series on different Microsoft Purview projects. So for anyone kind of interested or waiting to kill some time by reading my really long blog post, then go for it. You can check me out at wildcatsworld.com. But yeah, I'll be happy to provide the slides to anyone that wants them, and I can just give you that link so you can put it in the bio of your videos. And again, I really appreciate you invited me to come on the podcast. And by the way, Nikki, I'm loving the new hair color.
Oh, thank you.
Really suits you. Yeah.
Amazing. You are most welcome. It's been great having you on. I recently read another blog from you as well, Ewelina, around the 25 considerations for sensitivity labels, I think it was.
Right.
And I shared that internally here at Microsoft, and there was quite a lot of positive feedback on that. So for anybody, again, watching or listening, Ewelina has a lot of stuff on her website that I'm sure will benefit you. So go and give it a visit. There's going to be something on there for you, I'm sure. Awesome.
So I think that's about time to wrap up, really, isn't it? So thank you again for joining us. You're more than welcome to come on again, because you've got such useful information that you share on your blog. And this is kind of a way of really just trying to demystify it. I think people get scared of data security and data governance. They think it's all very difficult. And this is kind of really the purpose of our podcast, to say, you can get there. It's not always too difficult. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this time, and we'll see you all soon.
Indeed. See you later. Bye.
Bye.